Okay, so this comes as a video suggestion. And I thought it really was a great suggestion. And it comes from Albino Squirrel. He's the writer of the Syndicalist Papers blog. That blog is currently in a hiatus. But really, I think it's one of the best blogs and just totally underappreciated as far as go check it out. His suggestion, though, was what are your thoughts on National Bolshevism when you first started this channel, and what are your thoughts on it now? And I guess that question goes in kind of to the root of the history of this channel, and it opens up this video into being more introspective and retrospective than usual. And, I'm just going to start this by saying, and I feel really bad by saying this, because I'm kind of outing myself as a poser, but I never really thought of myself as a true National Bolshevik. I never really identified with that in a pure ideological sense. It kind of was a meme that I jumped on at the time because I thought it was funny. What interested me with the whole National Bolshevik or Nasbol thing was the meme surrounding it, and really the antics and activism of the party in Russia, the National Bolshevik Party, and then other Russia, and the leadership of Eduard Limonov. Eduard Limonov is such an enigmatic figure, and idiosyncratic. I just love the way that they acted. It's just interesting. He's a truly interesting figure, and I think because of his figure, that filtered out into the Nazbol meme at the time that I created that channel at some point in the 2010s. Because it's years later now. I guess that was at the beginning of Trump's presidency, even slightly before Trump's presidency. It's a I'm old moment because in total my channel has been around since 2017, so that would make it 7 years at this point. But at that time, 7 years ago, there was the Nasbol meme. And the Nasbol meme was just kind of like schizo, and you're going to believe in this far left thing and this far right thing. How do they come together? I don't know. But fuck you. It's schizo. I believe what I want to believe. We're the Nazbol Gang. And I really liked that meme, and I really liked that message. And so I dressed up as a character, covered my face. I don't know how I found that flag. And that flag is really nice material. Stood in front of that flag and made a Russian accent and made a character. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I made fun of the far left and the far right at the same time. And just kind of made a character out of it. And it was a really fun era for me of doing YouTube videos, because now it's 7 years, right? So there's different eras, if you will, of my YouTube channel. And that initial era, that flag era, which I call it now, that was a really fun time. It was really about having fun. It wasn't about how many viewers I'm getting or being serious or anything. It was just about having fun. And I had a really fun time at that point. At that early stage at that time, there was this YouTuber called Ling Anderson, and he was a major influence on the Nazbol Gang. He was this gay, Asian college professor, mathematician, and he would talk about white nationalism or race realism, and it was... He wasn't like pulling his punches. He was talking about the truth, and he was clearly into race realism, and he saw that him as an Asian person, he didn't exactly come out at the bottom, but interestingly, he was a gay guy whose primary fetish was white men, and so he really made this kind of meme channel out of it. Unfortunately, his meme channel was absolutely eradicated in the purge, and we'll get to the purge later. And so there's really only two, as far as I can find at least, two kind of like artifacts left of his channel. One is an interview he did with Pill Eater, and the other is he published a fetish book, it looks like, on Kindle. And so that's really all that's left of him. But just the way that he presented himself, the ironic humor, the absurdist humor, and ambiguity with extreme viewpoints and having humor, that was what the Flag era or the Nazbol Gang era of my channel was all about. The kind of ambiguity of humor mixed in with far-right politics. And I really dug at doing that. And I know maybe that makes me a poser, because I read some Nasbol stuff. I read 3 of Dugin's books. I read Germany Tomorrow. I read the biography of Lemonov. But I wasn't, a card-carrying national Bolshevik. I respected the ideology, but in general, I think at that point I was just a fascist in a very general sense, and a third positionist in a very general sense. And, when I did the interview with Cultured Thug, I said that. I think that at that time, a lot of people thought I was really a lot more Nasbol than I was. And I think to this day, a lot of people still didn't see that a lot of that antics were exaggerated and absurdist for the purpose of parody. But underneath, I was trying to have a message. And so, like, a video about gay marriage in Ireland, or protesting mass immigration to Europe, or talking about the low birth rates in Japan, I really felt liberated to talk about basic things like that. But if I was able to do it in a character, it really felt liberating at the time. I don't really know how to explain it beyond I was having fun. I felt like I could do anything, and I could tell jokes. It was really important to tell jokes when I was doing politics at that point. Like, one in particular I remember a lot is when Kavanaugh, when they made up all the bullshit against Kavanaugh when he was trying to go to the Supreme Court. They're trying to nominate him, and there was all these women saying he was some kind of date rapist frat boy. And then he would go up and be like, I'm a devout Catholic, I'm a lifelong virgin, I didn't drink beer, this is all fake. And of course, every time a Republican nominates a man, at least, for the Supreme Court, they're all rapists, right? They find all these women that, of course, the man doesn't even recognize and claim that he raped them. And it's happened multiple times, and they keep doing it every time. But with Brett Kavanaugh, they were doing that. And so I remember when he finally got nominated, I pointed the camera at the flag, the Nasbol flag, which is always in the background. That's why I call them the flag videos. And I held up a tall boy of PBR, and I'm like, we finally got there, guys. The frat bros are in the White House. Patriots are in control. We're winning. And it was just fun. I really dug doing that Nazbol Gang style. What I was able to draw attention to while doing the Nasbol thing, though, was I was able to kind of highlight how corporations are a part of the problem driving terrible trends in society, and seeing that state intervention in the economy could be used for good, at least to the right wing, because by that point a lot of stuff was really libertarian still. I think we've moved on to that point, and a lot of people see corporations as the big enemy. So the kind of foundation of that meme of the Nazbol Gang is kind of irrelevant now, because most of the right kind of sees corporations as their enemy at this point. And while I'll say I'm not anti-Nasbol at all either, I'm sympathetic to it, and I understand why it makes sense for Russia. When their country is at the peak of their power, it was the Soviet era. It doesn't make sense for the United States at all, though, of course, but it makes sense for the Russian Federation, or for successor states in that Soviet sphere. But it was so powerful and intoxicating doing the whole Nazbol thing, because it was like biting the bullet, right? Yeah, I am a crazy right winger. Yeah, I am a crazy left winger. At the same time, you're both a fascist and a communist at the same time. And that kind of mentality that meme brought, that's what I wanted to capitalize on in that channel. And of course, almost all the opinions were mine, but the way that I did them was very exaggerated. And what ended up happening, and people were expressing concern, was when I was doing the channel, in my private life, and where I was corresponding with my friends, I was becoming noticeably more and more sympathetic to communism and the Eastern Bloc states in that period. And what was happening, and I know it sounds weak and it sounds pathetic, was that the character I was doing was beginning to rub off on me in real life. And, you know, something I learned during that period is that irony is real. You think you're being ironic, that you're ironically enjoying this type of music, and you're just listening to this music in a hipsterish way, or you're watching this movie, or reading this book, or playing this video game in this hipsterish way, ironically, right? Because it's really bad, and then you like it. You know, you watch this movie that's so bad it's good, and then it becomes your favorite movie. You like the camp. And I don't really believe in irony. I believe that if you act a way, that if you like something, but you say you just like it ironically, what's going to happen is you're really going to like it. There really is no such thing as irony. The way that you act is what shapes your beliefs, and once you start acting that way, or you're ironically orienting yourself towards a belief or a preference, then your behavior and your whole mentality is going to follow suit. I mean, look at a similar thing with the Daily Shoah and how they were trying to be libertarians that joked about being Nazis. And now they're full-on Nazis. That's just how irony works. It's just that pipeline. That's just the way that you're going to go down if you're making these jokes ironically. Because eventually it's not ironic anymore, because irony isn't real, and that's the person you become. I guess kind of a political backstory for me is that I grew up in this kind of blue dog Democrat family in Montana. And so that's where my kind of point of view from politics starts there. And in middle school, you know, you start to get into music, and I got into metal, and I got into prog rock, and I got into punk and hardcore. And when I listened to punk and hardcore, the political message in there made my views so much more cringy than they started out as the blue dog Democrat views of my parents. And it pushed me into kind of like terrible leftism, but my terrible leftism at that time, it was really focused on America's foreign policy and disapproval of George W. Bush and then Obama's wars in the Middle East. And, you know, I said, well, gay marriage is okay, and I'm pro-choice, but I didn't focus on that kind of thing, right? I was against segregation, but I lived in Montana. There wasn't that many black people there, and if it didn't get talked about, it didn't get talked about. So in the 2000s and in the early 2010s, before the Great Awakening, those kind of racial issues weren't brought up that much. And so, during those formative years where I first got into music and I was influenced by hardcore, of course, you know, I still love metal, but I don't revisit a lot of punk rock that much. It's something that I liked when I was middle school, and I don't like that much anymore. But during those formative years of middle school and high school, the real focus was on foreign policy. And then, of course, there was a conspiracy theory period in high school, which I grew out of when I saw through it. But I was into, you know, your Jordan Maxwell's, your Max Egans, your David Icke's, your Alex Jones, your William Cooper, that kind of New World Order conspiracy culture which I don't even know if Alex Jones is even in that type of culture anymore. I don't know how much it even exists, because it's hard to even dig it up and see who's still left there, because a lot of those people are dead now. That kind of conspiracy culture that existed on the internet in the 2000s, or before the Great Awakening, before the wiping out of right-wing and conspiracy stuff. So I don't know how much that sphere exists. But a sphere that I think was a lot bigger and ended up influencing me a lot more was the whole libertarian sphere that I got into in high school. In those libertarian days, there were a lot of channels. There was, of course, the biggest channel of all, of that kind of YouTube sphere or YouTube era, Stefan Molyneux, but there was the early fringe elements, or even Confederal Socialist at one point. There was the early Morocco, there was like Junior Bacon Cheeseburger, there was In the End I Was Right. And if you're an old head, and I'm not that old, but if you were around in the late 2000s prior to the Awakening and you're talking about that stuff, that's going to be really old stuff, these people's channels. But I was watching a lot of that Rothbardian, at that time, anarcho-capitalist stuff, and I liked it. But what it ended up happening is I was like a far left-wing kid from punk and that type of thing. Then I went through a conspiracy phase, which didn't stick. Then I went through a libertarian phase, almost on the feet of that conspiracy. Like, one day I was into, like, NWO, Alex Jones type of thought, and the next day it was an ANCAP. Like, it was overnight, the flip from the two spheres. But then, somehow, my left-wing views and my anarcho-capitalist kind of views, like, merged, and I tried to do some kind of, like, mutualism or like weird combination of anarcho-syndicalism and anarcho-capitalism, and at one point I was like a left Marxist or a libertarian Marxist. It was just dumb, stupid shit. And then I, like in retrospective, totally dumb, stupid. Like, anarchism is the most totalitarian ideology. If you put anarchism into play, it would make Stalinism seem like the most freest country in the world. Those people completely do not believe in free thought, as we know. As we know now, right? Left-wing anarchists, they are the most totalitarian. There is no room for any divergence. But at that time, there was also like an left-wing anarchist sphere. There was, Secular Numinist, 1001 Nights, Buddha Gem, and those were the left-wing anarchists. And I was watching them at the same time that I was watching your fringe elements, your Morocco, the In the End I Was Right, your Stefan Molyneux, and I was watching them at the same time. I think that there was an early far-right sphere on YouTube at that time, but I think it was just getting shut down, because back then you could flag anybody and just shut down their videos. It was the public and the viewers during these like fights, these debates on YouTube. They had a lot of ability to just fight with when they were in a they would have their debates on like stick aim and shit like that, and then they would have these arguments and like feuds, and then their YouTube fan bases or through proxy accounts, people could shut down each other's channels and flag their videos. And so videos would just get, like, channels would get shut down. I think to this day, Maoist Rebel News, I think he was the only Marxist for a long, maybe even to this day to some extent. He's just been at YouTube since the very beginning. But if you notice, Maoist Rebel News is Maoist Rebel News 2, because Maoist Rebel News 1 got flagged to death in the early days of YouTube. And so there's like a billion different, and there's like isolated ones. There's like a trillion like old accounts for Ryan Falk on YouTube. And that's because his channels kept getting shut down, so there's all these isolated channels that he'd make videos on and wait a month, and then his channel would go back up. Because they were getting flagged and stuff back then. I'm getting way off tangent by talking about this. But that was the kind of sphere I was in, and I was very open-minded. In general, maybe I wasn't seeing far-right stuff because it kept getting flagged, but I was open-minded and listening to the far left-wing anarchists, actual communists like Maoist Rebel News, and libertarians. And I listened to some kind of like mainstream libertarian people like Thomas Woods. I still listen to conspiracy people at that time. Ryan Dawson, he still is around. He kind of mixes the conspiracy and the libertarian stuff, and he's still around. And I was still listening to all the conspiracy stuff at that time. But, you know, I was going into my freshman year of college, and I still ostensibly was this anarchist, left-wing communist, whatever, and libertarian socialist. And coming from, you know, Montana, I hadn't really bumped into those people in real life until I went to college. And that changed a lot of things. I saw that what I thought was important, kind of like this criticism of America as an empire, that wasn't really on their mind. And if it was such a tertiary, such a background thing. It wasn't touched on at all. What they really cared about was kind of like white guilt and weird, strange views of race. That you can do whatever you want sexually. Of course, the Great Wokening was starting to happen at that time. And just silly, weird, stupid, id pull things to steal the lefty pull phrase. It was just such hard id pull, and then I realized that that's what the left was. The left wasn't socialist, right? The left wasn't anti-empire. The left was about gay marriage in at that time, and then it would be about transsexuality, and then it was about white guilt, and that white people had to atone for the economic insuccess of blacks and other groups. That's what it was, and that's what it is about. There's, of course, a famous thing, somebody going on to the socialist Reddit and said, can you be a socialist and not believe in being approving of gay lifestyles? And of course they said no. Could you be a socialist and could you be a socialist, approve of gay lifestyles, and disapprove of, the definition of socialism? And of course you can be a free market socialist as long as you believe in gay values, being able to live out having sex with 100 guys a year. That's what was important to them, and that's what is important, and that's what defines them. So that realization really shifted me politically. And at the same time, I was rediscovering Christianity, Catholicism. I was raised a kind of like nominal Catholic, and I was becoming a lot more religious at the same time, and I stopped being a leftist. One channel in particular that really had a big influence on me at that time was this earlier channel from the libertarian days, which was transitioning to be far right. And that channel was Ryan Falk's Fringe Elements and his various offshoots. I think it would have been at that point New Europe Party or something like that. So anyway, that channel and what he was doing in that channel, it really shifted and opened my political horizons a great deal. And it introduced me to human biodiversity, which just kind of broke a lot of spells that I grew up with. And, it made the world make sense. That there wasn't some invisible force of racism that, there are unlucky people, but at the end of the day, if we look from space, people's decisions matter, and people's decisions correlate with their intelligence and their preferences. And that people's intelligence is inborn. And so if one group is more criminal, that's probably because one group is less intelligent. And that the results of that economically are because of that lack of intelligence. I think that the shift from libertarianism in that channel to a more far-right perspective, I think a lot of people were influenced by that. And the whole Great Wokening was happening at the same time. And the flagging of videos was definitely not a big thing at that point in YouTube. And so there was this explosion of right-wing content, which was probably influenced by Ryan Falk's shift from libertarianism to the far right. And that's where you get your Daily Showas, your Second Era, Morocco, and all these channels. Stefan Molyneux, the king of libertarianism, eventually went over to that side himself. And a lot of channels started voicing those things until they were purged. And so that's where the original Nazbol Gang channel came from. It came during that whole era. And I had a side channel, the Serp Kerp channel, which was all memes, edited video memes for fun. I'm not the best editor. I just steal clips from YouTube, put music over them, whatever. And I was making that channel, and I had the Nazbol Gang channel. And those were two different meme channels. Neither of them were serious. And I did them at the same time. But that original era of my YouTube channel that I have today, the flag era, if you will, that era came to an end. And there were two things that made that era come to an end. The first was the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand. And that happened on March 15th, 2019. The shooter was Brennan Terrett, and he live streamed himself from his own perspective down the gun camera, like playing a video game like Doom, shooting and killing various dozens of Muslim mosque attenders on a Friday. And he referenced a lot of right-wing memes. He played music off of his shoulder, off of, I think, a Bluetooth speaker while he did it, and said all these right-wing memes, getting rid of kebab and the Serbian music stuff. And I remember I watched it when it came out. I actually watched the video on 8chan when it came out, and it was unnerving. And then I saw all these siege type channels, because the whole Greed siege thing was at the peak at that point. And I saw all these siege channels. The James Mason Siege book, that is a book which justifies, it's a Nazi book, or maybe even post-Nazi, if you will, book, which is do individual lone wolf terrorism. Make them fear you. It's just kind of like the anarchist propaganda of the deed. Fear is politically important. Be a lone wolf terrorism. Kill people. That's the message of Siege. And all these Siege people were talking about how great the Christchurch shooting is and how great Brennan Terrett was and all this stuff. And they were wearing masks. They were wearing masks like I did in the Nazbol Gang. Because the mask was like I was dressing up like the IRA, standing in front of a flag, and then everybody was doing that, and they were saying siege stuff, and they were saying that this guy that took guns, killed all these people during a religious meeting, during the holy day. And I know, contrary-wise, yes, that people that attended that mosque joined ISIS or joined Al-Qaeda, that they flew over to the Middle East or Central Asia, and they fought for those organizations, right? I understand that. But shooting somebody during a prayer meeting and shooting women and children and old people during a prayer meeting, that's pretty reprehensible. So that whole thing, what he did, the memes, the whole irony of the ambiguity of it, and then on top of that, all the siege posting people caused me to second guess doing the flag vids. And I was like, I gotta stop doing this. I need to be very clear in what I'm saying so that I don't get lumped in with these siege people, because at that point, I was like, the FBI is going to be coming after us. And the next thing that happened, of course, was that YouTube got fucking wiped, right? And so many channels got decimated during the wiping. And it wasn't just far right-wing channels. it was also all the conspiracy stuff got wiped. I don't even know what the New World Order conspiracy type people even believe anymore, because they've been wiped. Everything got wiped. That other channel I had, the original Serp Kerp channel, which I just posted video tidbits of highlights of Jared Taylor's speeches and little edited for fun videos. That channel got obliterated. Ling Anderson's channel got obliterated. And all these channels got obliterated. And so what I did is I wiped down the Nazbol Gang channel, rebranded it Serp Kerp, because I just, that was a name I made up as a little kid. Comes off your tongue, and I always liked it. And so that's what my screen name is been, and that's what it is to this day. It's Serp Kerp. Renamed the Nazbol Gang channel Serp Kerp. Made a, like in the old days, like in the flag days, made a number 2, put all those videos on Nazbol Gang 2, stopped making the flag videos, because for real at that point I thought it was impossible to keep going on making those videos. Some of them got shut down, some of them I had to move to BitChute. To Volion or Eva Lion or whatever her name was, that video, for whatever reason, YouTube especially hates her. The YouTube community, the people in charge of censorship in YouTube, have a special hate boner for her. There was something about having her talk about far right-wing stuff that scared the bejesus out of YouTube. And so that video was annihilated. YouTube did not want that video. And some of the other videos on Nazbol Gang 2 got shut down. But for the most part, I was just going to do Serp Kerp and have a BitChute, put the spicier stuff on BitChute. And that's what's kind of worked ever since then. I did have another scare after January 6th. And I purged a lot of stuff after January 6th with COVID. Put that stuff over on BitChute, and it seemed well since then. But the takeaway is that we've moved past that era. That what happened at Christchurch, what happened on January 6th, what happened in the election in 2020, what happened through COVID, is that we've entered such a period of decline that free speech is going out the window, as we're seeing in this legislation in Canada. I mean, Germany and the UK never really had free speech to begin with, but I need to be very clear in what I'm saying, and I can't be ironic, I can't tell jokes about politics anymore, because now it's dead fucking serious. And that was the takeaway. And so, how much I love them and how much I miss them, I really can't do those flag vids anymore, because the aura that they present to the outside world is very hostile to a neutral person. I look like all those siege people that were saying, let's do domestic terrorism now. And even if that wasn't my message, clearly wasn't my message, that is what I felt that if you clicked on that channel subtly, you would associate me with. And so I just had to stop that. That's the reality. And I had to rebrand myself. Another thing that happened is that I don't identify so much with third positionism or fascism anymore. I still read a lot of stuff from that political philosophy, but it's not really my focus anymore. What ended up happening, and this was at the same time I stopped doing those flag vids, is I really got a lot more into environmentalism, deep ecology, resource scarcity, and that type of worldview, it profoundly changed how I saw the world. The idea that industrial civilization will perish from the earth due to a lack of resources really negates any drive or desire to create that fascist state. Why have a right-wing state that intervenes economically in an industrial economy for the benefit of those people and for the benefit of that ethnic group when, like, fossil fuels are just going to run out no matter what we do, and that industrial society is absolutely unsustainable? So what's the point, reason, rationale for any kind of centralized state? It just kind of comes to an end. It makes any kind of drive for kind of this right-wing nationalist interventionist centralized state that fascism or third positionism hoists as its ideological drive irrelevant. And so I didn't, it's not so much that I moved leftwards or I de-radicalized or anything like that. It's more that it's irrelevant now to me in my point of view. You know, I still have a lot, I still believe very deeply in human biodiversity. If you ever watch the Montana Secessionist vid, I believe everything I saw there. That's on BitChute, too spicy for YouTube. I believe all that stuff very wholeheartedly, and I'm deeply critical of liberalism. And when I say liberalism, I don't mean the Democratic Party, I mean the Enlightenment. But I don't really see an end goal for fascism or third positionism. It's just fleeting. It's not going to lead to anything. The whole edifice of this complex society we live in is crumbling, and I can see it now. And it's going to come to an end, and, you know, everybody's points and everybody says, oh, my radical ideology will finally have a chance when Mad Max happens, when it falls under. And I know that it sounds like a broken record, and I know I sound like that, and every ideology that's not in power says that, but it's not so much that the far right will win if industrial civilization collapses. Industrial civilization's collapse is not something that I'm envying, that I'm looking forward to. It's a reality which is dark and sinister. I don't think... What I really think is going to happen when industrial civilization happens is what I called the global democratic backslide. That's where we're going to see all these countries which were liberal democracies become, on paper, constitutionally, still liberal democracies, but are going to be super corrupt, either controlled by a left-wing party, if you're unlucky, or like Venezuela and South Africa, or you're going to see, if you're more lucky, countries like the Russian Federation or under Putin or Turkey under Erdogan. That's what I see the future being. These states which constitutionally and legally are liberal democracy, and liberal democracy is the ideological default worldwide, but the IQ to run liberal democracy and the level of resources even to run a liberal democracy in an efficient way are going to fall through the floor, and you're just going to have these kind of like dictatorships which view themselves as liberal democracies wearing liberal democracy like a skin suit and doing what the elites want rather than what the people want, instead of, you know, a re-emergence of some kind of like Leninism or equivalent of Leninism or fascism or even monarchism or something like that. I think that the default government type in the next 100 years is going to be a failed democracy. I moved towards a more broad right-wing worldview, if you will, than that more initial third positionist point of view that I had during the Nasbol flag era. My current format on YouTube is defined by these long video essays where I write out a script and I deviate a little bit from the script, but I try to stay on subject and I read from it aloud. That's what Fringe Elements has done, or Ryan Falk has done throughout the majority of his career, and that's kind of the influence that led me to that. Of course, during his most popular phase, he was making pretty slick edited videos, but he's since gone back to this more lecture type video, and that's what I feel most comfortable with. That's what I'm best at doing, I think. I could technically edit the videos, make them more streamlined, more slick, but when I tried to do that in the past, it seemed like it didn't make that much of a difference. And so I've just decided to keep them largely audio and largely as just lectures. I've strayed away a little bit from you doing solely political or international relations type videos, and just talking about whatever I want to talk about. And that's fun because, again, these videos, they're for me. And, you know, if I'm not feeling a lot of talking about political stuff, or I'm not feeling talking about international relations, then I'm just going to talk about what I like to talk about. If I like to talk about heavy metal, or if I like to talk about Godzilla, or if I like to talk about religion, I'm sorry if you came here for those initial Nasbol far-right videos, because I'm going to get to those videos, but at the moment I want to talk about what I want to talk about, because this, at the end of the day, is my channel. And the reality is, sometimes I run out of ideas, and when that happens, I just go on hiatus until I have enough ideas, I've written enough scripts to start making videos again. And I don't feel the need to make videos of quantity over quality. I want what I'm saying to have quality, but I also want to know what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of in the background of my brain that I think about a lot of times. A lot of the political stuff or history stuff I don't make videos on because I feel like I'm not going to be the best person to talk about that. I don't have enough to talk about that. So I actually would make more political philosophy videos, or more international relations or history of country videos if I could. I just don't feel like I should talk about something from a point of ignorance, or I don't have enough to really clearly talk about the subject. And so in this channel, I want to focus on quality over quantity. And if I don't have anything to say, I'm not just going to comment on some kind of trend on TikTok that feminists are doing. I'm not going to react to social justice warriors. And I'm not going to talk about the Ukrainian or Gaza war like it's some kind of baseball game and I'm going, which side is doing well, and calling it play-by-play. I want to make videos that I feel like I'm saying something. And if I don't feel like I'm saying something, I'll just go on a hiatus. And it looks like I'm going to go on hiatus in the future here for a while. And I've been on hiatus before, and I feel like when I make videos, they're like seasons. And I make a bunch of videos week after week after week, and then once I run out of ideas, the season's over and the hiatus begins. And that's what's going to happen. And I want to say, don't panic. I'll be back. And I love you guys as my fans, and I really appreciate you and everything you've done for the channel. And Serp Kerp will go on.